In February 2026, a 101-year-old company that has spent its entire existence selling steel did something almost nobody outside its own boardroom saw coming. It spent $733 million in cash, and it did not buy a mine, a truck plant, or a single new machine. It bought a software company. That company was Caterpillar. The acquisition was RPM Global, and it was not an isolated event. Weeks earlier, Caterpillar's CEO had walked onto a stage at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, the same stage that hosts phone makers and chip makers, and announced a partnership with NVIDIA to build artificial intelligence into heavy machinery. Months later, the company posted the single biggest quarter in its history, more than $20 billion in 90 days, powered in large part by a business built on data, connectivity, and recurring revenue rather than one-time equipment sales alone. Translate that into something you can picture. Caterpillar is the company behind the yellow bulldozers on every job site on the planet, and over the course of 1 year, it started acting less like a machinery company and more like a technology one. Here's the part that changes everything. For 100 years, Caterpillar's entire identity rested on one idea: build the toughest iron on Earth and let the iron speak for itself. That idea built an empire. It also nearly destroyed the company once already, and the fix Caterpillar found for that near-death experience is the reason this story exists. If you want to understand where the whole industrial economy is headed next, stick around, because this playbook is about to repeat everywhere else. And if stories like this are your thing, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. Caterpillar's founding story starts with a rivalry, not a partnership. Two competing tractor makers, the Holt Manufacturing Company and the CL Best Tractor Company, spent years trying to put each other out of business in California's Central Valley, before finally merging in 1925 to form the Caterpillar Tractor Company. The new company set up shop in Peoria, Illinois, and built its reputation on a single simple premise. If a job was too heavy, too muddy, or too remote for anything else, a Caterpillar machine could still get it done. World War II turned that premise into a global brand. Caterpillar bulldozers built airfields and supply roads for Allied forces on nearly every front, and when the war ended, the same machines came home to build the highways, dams and suburbs of the post-war boom. By the 1950s, the yellow paint and the black cat lettering were as recognisable on a job site as a hard hat. Here's the part worth sitting with. The business model behind that brand never really changed for the next several decades. Caterpillar engineered the most durable machine it could build, sold it once through an independent dealer, and let the sheer toughness of the iron do the selling for the next one. Parts and service existed, but they were an afterthought bolted onto the real business, which was moving new machines out the door. That model did not just work, it became the standard the rest of the industry measured itself against, and by the time the 20th century ended, Caterpillar was not just a manufacturer anymore. It was shorthand for heavy equipment itself, the way a tissue is a Kleenex or a copier is a Xerox. Then came the supercycle. Starting in the early 2000s, China's infrastructure boom sent demand for coal, copper and iron ore into overdrive, and every ton of ore pulled out of the ground meant another mining truck, another excavator, another Caterpillar dealer working overtime just to keep up with orders. Emerging markets across Latin America, Africa and Asia were pouring concrete just as fast, and Caterpillar's construction machines rode that wave right alongside the mining fleet. By 2012, the results were staggering. Caterpillar posted revenue of nearly $66 billion, the largest construction and mining equipment maker on the planet, selling through dealers in more than 190 countries. The stock had more than tripled in the decade leading up to that peak, and Wall Street treated the company as a bellwether for the entire global economy. If Caterpillar was selling machines, the thinking went, the world was building. And here's the thing nobody wanted to say out loud while the checks were clearing. Every dollar of that record revenue depended on customers deciding over and over again to buy something new. Not a subscription, not a service contract, but a brand new multi-million-dollar machine purchased with cash that mining and construction companies only had when commodity prices were high and getting higher. That dependency looked like strength in 2012. It was actually the entire business model's single point of failure, and the whole industry, not just Caterpillar, was about to find out exactly how fragile unbeatable can be when the one thing propping it up disappears almost overnight. Here's the honest reason the good years ended. Oil prices collapsed starting in 2014, China's growth slowed, and commodity prices across the board fell off a cliff. The mining and drilling companies that had spent a decade buying Caterpillar's biggest, most profitable machines did not just slow their spending, they stopped it completely. The math turned brutal fast. Caterpillar's sales and revenues fell from that 2012 peak of nearly $66 billion all the way down to $38.5 billion by 2016, an 18% single-year drop in 2016 alone, down from $47 billion the year before, and a decline of well over 40% across 4 straight years. For a company that had never in 90 years posted 4 consecutive years of falling revenue, this was uncharted territory, and the numbers behind the headline were worse than they looked. Caterpillar posted an annual loss in 2016. The company cut more than 10,000 jobs, reduced its total workforce by over 31,000 people since 2012, and stripped $1.5 billion in costs out of the business just to keep the lights on. It gets worse. This was not a Caterpillar problem. It was an industry-wide commodity crash, which meant every competitor was hurting at the exact same time, for the exact same reason. There was no rival to steal share from and no clever pricing move that could fix it, because the customers themselves had simply run out of cash to spend. The flaw was structural. A company that only made real money the moment someone signed for a brand new machine had built itself a business with no way to earn a living during the years nobody was buying. Here's what the headlines from that era missed entirely. While Caterpillar was gutting its own headcount by the tens of thousands, a small, unglamorous corner of the company was doing the opposite. In 2015, in the middle of the worst downturn in Caterpillar's history, leadership carved out a new marketing and digital division and placed executive-level focus on something it called analytics and innovation at the exact moment nearly every other department was bracing for the next round of cuts. Inside a company built by mechanical engineers, that decision did not land well. Veterans who had spent entire careers obsessing over horsepower, hydraulics, and steel plate thickness treated the new data team the way most manufacturing lifers treat anything with the word digital attached to it, with polite skepticism that occasionally slipped into open dismissal. The team's founding constraint was brutal and unspoken. Prove that a spreadsheet and some sensor data could make money for a company that had spent 90 years believing only steel could, all while carrying no big budget and no guarantee it would survive the next round of cuts. In 2017, with layoffs still fresh in the halls, Caterpillar made a purchase that looked strange for a company still bleeding cash. It acquired Yard Club, a small construction equipment rental startup out of California, and folded it into a new unit it called Cat Digital Labs, described internally as the company's own digital startup, living inside a 92-year-old industrial empire. Nobody inside Caterpillar knew it yet, but that small, almost embarrassing acquisition was about to become the seed of something far bigger than a rental app. In 2018, that scattered digital effort was formally pulled together into Cat Digital, the company's dedicated technology and data arm. Its first job was not glamorous. Get every excavator, generator, and haul truck talking. Caterpillar had actually owned the raw material for this for over a decade already. A telematics sensor called Product Link had been bolted onto machines since the mid-2000s, quietly recording engine hours, fuel burn, and location data. The problem was almost nobody used it for anything. The data sat inside the machine instead of inside the company. Cat Digital's actual mission was turning a sensor nobody was using into a business that did not exist yet. The motivation behind all of it was simple to say and hard to execute. Turn a one-time equipment sale into a recurring relationship that kept paying long after the truck left the dealer's lot. Those bundled maintenance and uptime deals became known internally as customer value agreements, and by the mid-2020s, more than 2 out of every 3 new machines and engines left the factory with one already attached. Leadership eventually translated that motivation into a hard public number. Grow what the company called services revenue. Everything from parts and predictive maintenance to digital fleet monitoring and equipment financing. From $14 billion, the baseline set in 2016, the exact year Caterpillar was at its weakest, all the way to $28 billion by 2026. Sit with that for a second. The worst year in Caterpillar's modern history was not something the company wanted to forget. It became the starting line for the business that was supposed to make sure a year like that never happened again. Smaller, unglamorous wins added up too. The online parts platform Cat Digital built now processes more than $15 million in sales every single day, ordered by contractors from a phone instead of a dealer counter. For most of Caterpillar's history, a machine was just steel, hydraulics, a diesel engine, and a driver in the seat. The industry treated that as the whole product, and engineers on the shop floor treated anything beyond it as somebody else's problem. Here's the specific obstacle Cat Digital had to solve. A sensor bolted onto a mining truck has to survive 40-degree heat, constant vibration, and dust thick enough to choke a car engine, then transmit a signal from a pit that often has no cell coverage at all. Building a tougher machine was hard. Building a way for that machine to talk back from the middle of nowhere was a different kind of hard. So the team reframed the question, not how to build a smarter machine from scratch, but how to give a machine that already existed a way to communicate. Picture every excavator, loader, and truck as a body Caterpillar had spent a century perfecting, muscle, bone, and brute strength, already world-class. What it lacked was a nervous system, something to carry signals from every joint back to a brain that could act on them. Product Link became the nerve endings. Helios, the data platform built to catch what those nerves reported, became the brain, and Cat MindStar Command, letting a truck drive itself with nobody in the seat, became the reflexes. The proof showed up in the numbers. Connected assets grew from roughly 1.2 million in 2021 to more than 1.6 million by the end of 2025, and trucks running on that same system had autonomously hauled more than 8.6 billion tons of material across 3 continents. The fleet climbing from 690 trucks to 827 in a single year. The body finally had a nervous system. What Caterpillar still had to prove was that a customer would pay for the signal the same way they had always paid for the steel. Before you get too excited about a machinery company turning into a software company, there is a catch, and honestly, there are a few of them. The math only holds if you squint. Even with services revenue climbing to $24 billion in 2025, that was still barely a third of Caterpillar's total sales and revenues of $67.6 billion that same year. The company had not replaced steel with software. It had bolted software onto steel and was betting the ratio would keep shifting in its favour over time. That original $28 billion target for 2026, built around the darkest year in company history, quietly slipped. By 2025, leadership had already reframed the same goal as $30 billion by 2030, 4 years later than originally promised. Nobody at Caterpillar calls that a miss out loud. The math does the talking on its own. Here's the catch that should worry investors most. The newest, fastest growing piece of this story, power generation for AI data centers, is concentrated among a handful of hyperscale customers spending at a pace drawing real scrutiny. In July 2026, one commentator on CNBC's Fast Money warned on air that the debt some hyperscalers were issuing to fund the build-out was starting to look like it belonged in junk territory. Caterpillar does not carry that debt directly, but its newest growth engine sits entirely downstream of it. This is not proof the bet has already failed. It is proof the bet is not finished yet, and Caterpillar has lived through this exact movie before. A single industry deciding to spend big, all at once, is precisely the kind of concentration risk that gutted the mining business back in 2015. This is not a lab claim anymore. This is real, and here is the full picture behind the moment from the opening of this video. On February 17th, 2026, Caterpillar closed the acquisition of RPM Global Holdings, a company headquartered in Brisbane, Australia, that had spent nearly 50 years building nothing but mining software. The price was roughly $733 million cash, paid by a company that built its identity for a century on the idea that real value came from steel you could put your hands on. Caterpillar did not buy a mine or a truck factory. It bought code, deployed across 125 countries, and called it a notable milestone in its long-term strategy. 6 weeks earlier, at CES in Las Vegas, CEO Joe Creed had walked onto a keynote stage built for phone makers and chip companies, not bulldozer manufacturers, and announced a partnership with Nvidia to build what the two companies called physical AI and robotics for heavy industry. A 101-year-old machinery company stood in the same spotlight as the world's most valuable chip maker. Then came the number that made Wall Street stop arguing about whether any of this mattered. On August 4th, 2026, Caterpillar reported second quarter revenue of $20 billion, $500 million, the first time in company history it cleared $20 billion in a single quarter. Power and energy, the segment building generators and turbines for data centers, grew 17%, with power generation sales climbing on AI infrastructure demand. The order backlog hit $72 billion, up 92% year over year, stretching into 2030. The bet a small, unglamorous digital team made back when the company was laying off 10,000 people had just helped deliver the best quarter in Caterpillar's 101-year existence. Let's zoom out for a second, because Caterpillar is not the only industrial giant running this playbook. Deere is fighting its own customers over who controls the software locked inside a tractor. Komatsu and Volvo Group are racing to bolt telematics and recurring revenue onto machines that used to be sold once and forgotten. A distinctly Caterpillar strategy is quickly becoming the only strategy left for anyone still making a living selling things built out of steel. Here is where this likely goes next, based on everything already in motion. 1. Services revenue keeps climbing, and if Caterpillar hits its delayed $30 billion target by 2030, software and services make up close to a third of everything the company sells. 2. Autonomous trucks stop being a mining curiosity. With the fleet nearly doubling in a year, expect autonomy to push from hundreds of trucks toward thousands. 3. More acquisitions like RPM Global follow, as Caterpillar and its rivals decide it is faster to buy software companies outright than build every capability from scratch. 4. The data center power boom becomes either the thing that re-rates Caterpillar as a technology company, or the same kind of concentrated risk that gutted mining a decade ago. Both outcomes are still on the table. 5. Physical AI. The robotics push announced with Nvidia becomes the next chapter of this bet, extending the nervous system Cat Digital built for trucks into machines that can reason about the job site around them. So here is a question worth sitting with. Does Caterpillar's bet mark the moment every industrial giant quietly becomes a software company, wearing a hardware disguise? Or does the next commodity downturn prove that steel still calls the shots, no matter how much data gets bolted onto it? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you want the next story before anyone else finds it, subscribe, because this transformation is only getting started.